They rode hard. The horse reared in terror. Hands grabbed at them, gripping at fabric and flesh. Then they hit the ground hard. Malcolm looked at his wife Anne and smiled. She noticed him and smiled back. The wind blew some of her hair across her face. He brushed it aside and behind her ear, grinning. The day had been wonderful so far. There was so much to see. Market stalls, people making things, live animals, all sorts of entertainment, including live music. Children ran through the crowds, playing and cheering as they went. Suddenly, they heard a nearby crowd cheer, and the couple looked up to see what was happening. They saw a pickpocket that had been knocked to the ground and was now scrabbling to get back up, running away with children throwing small stones at them. Malcolm wrapped his arm around Anne, pulling her in, giving her a little squeeze, and asked her if she'd like to go. Anne nodded, and they walked back to where the horse was stabled. Malcolm paid the man, who helped Anne up onto the back of the horse behind Malcolm. He moved his sword out of the way, as she made herself comfortable behind him, holding on tight. They thanked the man, and with a light kick of the heels, the chestnut horse sprang into life and started to trot down the old dirt road. After about a mile, there was fewer people now walking on the coast road, and there was becoming times when the couple were the only people travelling on the road at all. Malcolm noticed people up ahead. One man, possibly two. But only one was in the road. Malcolm became uneasy. He'd once been a soldier, a fighting man, and he knew when someone was paying far too much attention to you. The man waved the couple down, but Malcolm wasn't taking any chances. He stopped his horse a good 10 foot away from the man and had his hand on the hilt of his sword. "What do you need?" Malcolm asked the man. The man said nothing, but his face changed. His lips curled up to a menacing grin. And before they knew what was happening, people raced from a dip in the ground and set upon the couple, hands grabbing at them, pulling at their clothes, their skin, their hair, anything they could reach. Malcolm felt Anne get ripped off the back of the horse. Then the horse reared, throwing Malcolm off its back and onto the ground. It knocked the wind out of him, but Malcolm jumped back up, pulling out his sword, swinging freely and jabbing at anyone who came close. Swinging his sword wildly, moving towards Anne, his wife, who was still on the ground. But he could barely see her. She was being mobbed by so many of these dirty, feral vagrants. Malcolm's blood ran cold. Anne had stopped screaming. Some of the vagrants started shouting. They had noticed a group running towards them. Other people coming back from the fair were running as fast as they could to try and help the couple. The vagrants vanished as quick as they appeared. When the crowd reached Malcolm, he was on his knees crying, next to the lifeless body of Anne, whose throat had been cut and had been disemboweled. Alexander Sweeney Bean was born in the 15th century in East Lothian and was the son of a ditch digger. But the work was too difficult for him, so one night he ran away with his betrothed, a lady known as Black Agnes Douglas. But for the pair, money was tight. They started robbing people as a way to make money. But it is unknown if they accidentally killed someone or they killed the victim to leave no witnesses. And in their desperation, they looked at the body lying there and looked at the fire. Their eyes met, and they realized they were thinking the same thing. So they cut off some flesh from the body and tasted it. But they were surprised how good that it tasted. and the couple made their home in a sea cave that became cut off when the tide was in. The couple kept up their work, robbing, murdering and butchering people wandering too near the cave. And over the years, the family grew. The couple had 6 daughters and 8 sons, who in turn had 14 granddaughters and 18 grandsons. Although feral and cruel, they were not stupid, and the family would throw some limbs into the sea, so when they washed up on the local beach, people would assume the missing person had been attacked by wild animals, or had fallen into the sea. Local people started to panic, and trust among people became a luxury no one could afford. Locals grew into a mob and started hanging people. Their victims were mostly innkeepers who were thought to have seen the missing people last. But then, one day, the Bean clan crept out of their cave. On a coastal road, they attacked a man and his wife who were returning from a fair. One group pulled the woman off the horse and had her stripped and disemboweled before the other group had chance to wrestle the man to the ground. Realizing the fate that was about to fall him, he fought desperately to escape, driving his horse into his attackers. As he fought for his life, a group of 20 or so people also returning from the fair happened upon the scene. After a brief and violent exchange, the Bean clan retreated back to the sea cave. As they retreated, they left behind the mutilated body of the woman, which was used as evidence. They also left a score of witnesses. The husband was taken before the Chief Magistrate of Glasgow, who, after hearing the husband's tale and adding that together with the list of recorded missing people and the body parts that had been washed up on the beaches, he decided to take the matter straight to the top and informed the king. And King James II of Scotland promptly arrived with a small army of 400 men, a pack of tracker dogs, together with a band of local volunteers. They launched one of the biggest manhunts the country had ever seen. Like many times before over the years, the search party extended through the countryside and coastline, and like before, nothing was discovered, with the groups passing the sea cave over and over. That was, however, until the dogs picked up the scent of decaying human flesh while passing a partly waterlogged cave. The dogs led the troop into the sea cave. With no natural light, the searchers entered the cave by torchlight. Surrounded by darkness and echoing sounds of crashing waves and distant voices somewhere deep in the cave, the troop slowly crept into the cave, passing barrels of salted and pickled human flesh. And then they found this vagrant family, sat in the heart of the cave, surrounded by human remains. There were limbs hanging from the ceiling on ropes jammed into cracks, and a pile of clothing and jewellery that had been taken from people. After a brief fight, the entire Sawney Bean family, all 48 of them, were arrested and marched off to Edinburgh by the king himself, to the Tolbooth jail in Edinburgh. Then, on the next day, they were transferred to Leith. The Bean clan's crimes were considered so heinous and the family so subhuman that normal justice just wouldn't suffice. And the entire family was sentenced to death without a trial. The following day, 27 men of the family met a fate similar to that of their victims. They had their genitals, hands and feet cut off and thrown into a fire, and were left to slowly bleed to death. This was done as the women were forced to watch on. And then the 21 women were tied in place and burned like witches in huge fires. This version of the story is from the Newgate Calendar, subtitled The Malefactor's Bloody Register, which was a popular collection of moralising stories about sin, crime and the criminals who committed them, which started appearing around 1750. Originally a monthly bulletin of executions produced by the keeper of the Newgate prison in London, the calendar's title was appropriated by the publishers, who put out biographical chapbooks about notorious criminals such as Sawney Bean, Dick Turpin, and Moll Cutpurse. The family supposedly lived in a coastal cave in Benane Head, near Ballantrae. The cave was 180 metres deep, and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide, enabling the couple to live there undiscovered for nearly 25 years. The town of Girvain, located near the macabre scene of the murder and debauchery, was another legend that ties in with the Bean clan. It says one of Bean's daughters eventually left the family and settled in Girvain, where she planted a tree that became known as the Hairy Tree. And after her family's capture and exposure, her identity was also revealed, and angry locals hanged her from the top of the Hairy Tree. Many years later, the felling of the Hairy Tree was commemorated with a sign of the Hamilton Arms, a local public house. The Sawney Bean legend closely resembles the story of Christy Cleek, which may be the inspiration for the Bean legend. Christy Cleek was a criminal, a butcher from Perth, named Andrew Christie, who is said to have lived during a famine in the mid-14th century. It is said Christie joined a group of scavengers in the mountains, where his skills as a butcher were put to use when one of the party died. The gang then developed a taste for human flesh, and began to waylay travellers, feeding on their bodies and their horses. The story goes that Christy Cleek got his name as he would haul his victims from their mounts with a shepherd's crook, known as a cleek, before dispatching them on the ground. Around 30 people were killed before the gang was hunted down, although Christy Cleek himself is said to have escaped. The story of Sawney Bean is argued by many today as nothing more than political propaganda, which was designed to degenerate the Scots after the Jacobite rebellions. But this has been argued that if the Sawney Bean story is said to be deliberately anti-Scottish, how do you explain the equal emphasis on English criminals in the same publications, as that would surely take the sting out the point of the Scots being the worst. Another cannibal story from Scotland, which is arguably more similar to Sawney Bean, can be found in the 1696 works of Nathaniel Crouch, a compiler and popular history writer who published under the pseudonym Richard Burton. He tells the following tale, which allegedly happened in 1459, the year before the death of James II of Scotland. About which time a certain thief who lived privately in a den, with his wife and children, were all burnt alive. They having made it their practice for many years to kill young people and eat them. One girl, only a year old, was saved, and brought up in Dundee, who, at 12 years of age, being found guilty of the same horrific crime, was condemned to the same punishment, and then the people followed her in great multitudes to the execution. Wondering at her unnatural villainy, she turned towards them, and with cruel countenance said, "What do you thus rail at me, as if I had done such a heinous act, contrary to the nature of man? I tell you that if you did but know the pleasant taste of human flesh, none of you all would forbear to eat it." And thus, with an impertinent and stubborn mind, she suffered deserved death. It is likely the story of Sawney Bean isn't true, but some experts believe there are elements of truth from an earlier time linked in the story that have been embellished and altered over time to make it more relevant to readers and more salacious. But these stories do need to come from somewhere, and something to bear in mind is that the absence of evidence is not the same as the evidence of absence. And there has been numerous books and films about Sweeney and his family, such as Sawney, The Flesh of Man, and The Hills of Eyes, to name a few. But what do you think? Is there truth to the tale? Was he a real man with a cannibal family? Or was this all just made up? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any story suggestions, please contact me. But that will do it, and thank you for your support and your very generous tips. Take care.